Why not we talk about design thinking in context of life, work life, and work itself. So all the three things we said will merge and get a wonderful panel who can talk to us what design thinking is all about.
Consumerization of enterprise, they call it consumerization of SaaS, which is, if you see historically consumer companies, right, like Apple, of course, and Google, and all the consumer companies, Facebook, all the apps that you have, they have historically really worked hard on their design. To basically every pixel that you see in your mobile phone is designed for, right? Every color, whether it's which shade of blue it is, it's almost like my wife did it herself, because it was so detailed, thought of. I'm just remembering all the arguments we've had. So I think every single pixel is very well thought of in the consumer world, and Ankur will talk to you a little bit about that. But enterprise historically has been, okay, basically, what does it need to sell? Right? And I think what does the CFO need, or what does the head of HR need? The whole consumer philosophy of beautiful products, amazing products, which users can touch and feel, start using immediately without any training. I think that's the modern theme. We've seen several companies now, both in India and abroad, who are riding that theme. And there's no better time to implement what I call, or everyone calls, user-centric thinking, which is, we had this list earlier in the beginning, and all those stakeholders are important. But right in the center, I think most companies today who are thinking of modern systems are placing the user, because that's the biggest workforce, right? In a work life, in any organization, ultimately you want all your users to use the technology as much as they can, and that provides with the best commercial benefits. So putting user at the center and usability of the product at the center, which consumer companies have always done, and then putting everything around that is the new mantra.
The fact is, we all think that we know the user, but we don't, and this requires a very different set of thought process. So design thinking for me are two extremes. One is an extreme which happened almost 10 years back and is quoted very often as the perfect example of design thinking, which is, if you were to go back 10 years and ask anyone, what kind of mobile phone would you want? No one will say, hey, give me a mobile phone that has all screen, no keyboard, and I'll use my fingers to use it. No one did that. No customer would have imagined an iPhone coming out just out of the blue. Everyone was used to a world that they were so comfortable with. Nokia was the dominant one. And then it took the genius of someone to say, I will completely go down a route where I will not ask what people want. Because guess what? They don't know. They actually do not know what they want. They think they know what they want, but let me start from first principles and go down. And then there's the other cohort of design thinking, which is, the only way for you to figure out what to build is if you just keep asking what is it that the user wants, or you keep tracking them as they live their life. And my argument is that HR, in particular, can only be about that second part. It can only be about you knowing what users want, because we're dealing with people. We ask them. That's it. It's as simple as that. We just go and say, launch a survey. Within half an hour, out of 480 people, you have 300 responses. Most likely that's the truth. They will tell you what they want. So why don't you go ahead and start policy making, which is not driven by your feeling of what users want, just as we feel that we know the entire Indian consumer base, but driven by just simply asking. And that, for me, is the very core, simple thesis of design thinking.
If HR has to go digital, we have to think beyond digital. If we are talking about apps, and all we are doing is digitizing processes that we did by other means, let's say your kind of ops HR, or to create some form of an MIS and put the employee at the center, give him control of his own data on a phone, that's very good, and that's necessary, and that needs to happen. But if we are going to go into a more strategic role for HR, then we have to go beyond the digital into thinking about what led to that problem in the first place. So no problem can be solved at the level at which it was created.
Design thinking is so fascinating that it becomes a way of life. It becomes part of our DNA, we apply it to our workplace, we apply it to our work life, we apply it to our personal situations, because it's really a philosophy, because it allows you to fail, it allows you to tolerate failure, it makes you a better person because you have that much flexibility in your thinking. But where are the design thinkers talking about the traffic situation in Delhi, when you come all the way from Delhi to Gurgaon and are on the road for 2 hours? But has it cascaded down to all levels? Do they apply it to every single aspect of their work life? They may be producing tools, they may be talking about design thinking, but how much has it perpetrated right down through the layers of the organization? Is it something that has really become part of their culture? So I think it's a thought for all of us to think, how much are we really going to focus on culture of design thinking, culture of out-of-box thinking? Design thinking is a good name for it, but it's really allowing people to think differently. It is still a very much idea on the table. It has not become part of the culture, and if you really want people to be focused on user experience, even in the HR context, how many, we saw the show of hands, employee experience. What is it that we think about employee experience? Because we don't know many of the challenges that employees are going through.
So why is design thinking suddenly so relevant for employees? It appeared to me that possibly there are 3 reasons for it, right? The first reason is experience. I think we cannot differentiate between an employee and a consumer. And the thing about experience is it either rises or falls based on the best available or the worst available example. The second part of the game is adoption. I mean, one of the things about all businesses, and I suspect everyone here, depending on whichever company you are and everyone on this podium, we are in a situation in businesses which are changing dramatically. And if it's not, then you're in the wrong business. You should really find one which is. And if that be the case, then the question comes, and when businesses change, you have to drive adoption to new ways of doing things. And adoption driving is all about thinking about how people will relate to that change. I need to find a way where 1,000 people in my organization is going to actually give and take instantaneous feedback. Now that's all very nice in concept and format, but you also need something which makes it easy, attractive, useful, and creates that communication. The third point, before I stop, is this whole issue about changing business needs, creating the need for relearning and reskilling. And my submission, having been in subject matter expert and knowledge services business and running a few of those for the last 12 years, is the rate at which we need to learn and unlearn cannot be done with existing teaching modules. It just can't be. The e-learning models and everything that you have in the current existing format, and obviously there are cutting-edge stuff that is happening, the need for the businesses can't be done. So therefore, design thinking is actually needed for employees to be relevant for the needs of the businesses.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I think Sonu and Shantanu are saying in bold, let process not take over the user or an employee. So I think we have fantastic inputs from the panel. You keep your questions ready. So I think first question I'll give to Arvind because you were asking. I'll come back to you.
So you said that HR probably meets only 3 or 4 times in the employee life cycle. My personal view is that it's a very limited view that you have, and that's why probably you've experienced extremely high exit interviews.
My opinion was as per my experience. I have 16 years experience in internet companies where I've seen very, very high attrition, and I've seen this problem where HR generally interacts with people where when they are actually interviewing and hiring, and mostly the problem comes out when the exit interview happens. So in between, to stop attrition, my point was to have more personalized experience with the guys, because you don't get to see their point of view when they are struggling through, and it's very difficult to hire good talent.
I wanted to ask Ankur, and you were sharing an example, you can pick that up now. But one question in at least HR world, what I've seen is people say, if you can codify it, if you can unify it, or if you can gamify it, I'm happy. Nothing more, just this much. And this is the problem we are struggling. So is design thinking so limited that we put everything in technology and that is design thinking?
No,
please go ahead.
I think design thinking is genuinely just a way of thinking. It's nothing more than that. It doesn't need to translate into a system or a process or an eventual goal. It's just how is the entire organization geared towards thinking from first principles and what is the source of that thinking coming through. Now, it could be, as I mentioned, an absolutely wild word which says, I don't care what people think because they don't know what they think, or let me just ask what is it that they need. I think we shockingly forget to ask people what they need.
So HR department takes over. So I'll come to you both. And Itu, you want to say something on this?
Design thinking is a fad. So the great Donald Norman said it's a useful fad. And let me just share with you why he said it's a useful fad. Because it draws attention to certain things that we have not been paying attention to. What are those? The big thing is looking at systems instead of products. So it's not about necessarily designing an app, though that's something that you have to do, but looking at, by the time something is made into an app, it is actually an algorithm. So what are the properties of an algorithm? It has known inputs and known outputs. The output is certain, satisfaction is guaranteed. But an algorithm, in fact, comes from a heuristic. And a heuristic is a shorthand of a certain kind of a problem. A heuristic itself is derived from a mystery, which is a large and imponderable thing which we don't know how to deal with. So let's take an example. The concept called leave is a heuristic approach to a large mystery called leisure. And this itself, hey, I haven't reached the punchline yet. Hang on. The large mystery called leisure itself came up due to a 20th century phenomenon called regular work. Regular work didn't exist 150 years ago. So it is the notion of regular work that made the concept of saying, when do I get time off? Let's codify it. Let's call it something. Let's call it leave. It's got mysterious numbers like 27, 18, 9. How many of you recognize those, okay? And those things I can now turn into a process, as you called it, a process or an algorithm. And the reason we are stuck to those processes is we haven't considered the heuristic that got us here and the mystery that got us to the heuristic. So here's a useful 3 stages way of thinking about it. And the reason I put the mystery problem here is HR has to think about what are the areas where it wants a big payoff. Where are the big payoffs coming from? Are they in saying that I have a better MIS? Of course, that's at the algorithm level. You have to be working on that continuously. But what you're also doing is while you're turning your heuristics into algorithms, you're also turning back and saying, where is the next mystery? Sure. Attrition is a mystery. Retention is a mystery. These are, and with now real consequences. If attrition is at around 12%, HR has no role. It goes up to 14%, everyone is running behind HR saying, sack these guys, get rid of them, and so on.
All right, no, well said. Thank you, Itu. Gentlemen there, I'll come back.
The one question is that, is it design thinking, again, a buzz thing, like we had it from benefits, starting from benefits, or before there's something else, I don't know. Then it started from employee engagement, then involvement, and all this stuff. Now we're talking about design thinking. We had last 2-3 years back, we had millennials, we talk about Gen Ys, Gen Zs, and then we are creating a price. My question was, is it an evolution or is it just a buzz?
Design thinking is a very common sense, right? It's designing for users rather than, so we are not users. We are just one persona in that user set.
Yeah.
We are just one persona of users. So once so while you are designing, you have to keep all the other people in mind rather than only.
So were we not keeping that in mind when we are having all application, which were thinking customization, other things? We were doing it earlier.
Yes, but at a later stage. So design thinking makes sure that you keep the user in the center at a first step rather than, just doing UI,
so you
UX,
start with the design thinking.
Visual design.
You start with the design thinking. Shantanu.
Yeah, look, I think the whole idea for design thinking, why it's a useful fad, is it brings back experience into the center as opposed to efficiency. When I say as opposed to, it's not necessarily at the cost of efficiency, But a lot of management theory, and by the way, I have been selling operational transformation for, as I said, 12 years now. And before that, have been on the receiving side, being sold operational transformation. The logic was always driven on efficiency, and then it went to effectiveness. But now experience is at the center. And given the changing nature of the business, experience is what now differentiates.
How do we communicate the power of design thinking and the value proposition to design thinking to the CXO levels, and especially the HR level? Because I have experienced that they roll out the systems, technology, and unfortunately it does not meet the accessible standards, and then they're worried about the compliance, and I'm worried about not meeting the compliance, and as some compliance leads to the consequences as big salary being stopped. So how do you actually convince this business leaders, and especially the HR leaders, the value of design thinking?
So if you look at any product organization, right, like Ankur's here, or SAP, or PeopleStrong, or any of these organizations, they have a very strong core called the product group, right? And the product group basically does feature releases, okay, what more we build in the product. And typically for most organizations, it's a very live product, so they do a monthly release and all that. I think one important principle of design thinking to me in the modern arena, right, and I think these are changes that have happened, is that a good design is a living design. Even if you look at like an iPhone, right, which is a heavily productized product, right? We have a release every 6 months. We have a major release every year, right? Most other phones have release like every month, every 2 months, right? So I think HR group, if you think of HR, I was just thinking about some of the questions, not as a service, but as a product for a minute, right? And you say the HR team itself is the product manager for the HR product that you're offering to the rest of the organization. And keep it a live product where I don't think you can win the battle in one day and say, we will do all this. But if you keep incrementally adding things and keep it live, keep it going, make it a living organism which keeps on serving better and better month after month. So have like a monthly meeting where you say, okay, what is our next month release? What do we do? I think that's one.
And I think to be able to influence the CXO or the CEO and to buy into this, they are very, in my experience, very result-oriented community. So they need to see what will be the ROI. And so you have to actually demonstrate the evidence of this being a success. So as many stories, as many experiences, as many, things that we can do to showcase that there is a great ROI in investing in design thinking, you'll be successful.
To me, design thinking about people is not an HR problem or a CHRO cell.
It's a business problem.
It's a business problem because if you define HR as your core mission being employee performance or human resource asset ROI, whichever way you want to position it, then actually you should sell it to the CEO or the business leader. CHRO doesn't have to be sold a design thinking model to think about how to do HR differently, because there's one part of HR which is very transactional. You can apply lots of design thinking, no one has to be sold. You should do it in any case. There's another part which is about employee vitality and employee performance, which frankly is a business problem.
The question that I have for the panels is that at a lot of times there is a feeling that comes into our mind that design thinking may be a paradox. And the reason why I ask that question is that we are told by leaders many times that, hey, look at how this problem was solved in the past. Look at solving it in the tried and the tested way. Right, so how do you deal with that paradox is what I'd like to know from the panel.
You will get this pushback very often that, why try something unconventional where there is already a tried and tested way. So it's a lot about convincing. You have to have that business case and the ability to present that. And I think in today's world, there are many examples with, from a very rudimentary aspect of human life to solving big organizational problems through design thinking. There are many examples that will help.
My question is to Ankur and Rajul. And Ankur, response actually thinking from what you said, which is design thinking is about asking, what do you want? So in your respective organizations, to both of you, how often do you go back to the HR and ask, what do you want to make employee experience go to the next level?
That's a great question. So incidentally, it was last week. But I'll tell you the larger genesis of it. I think HR as a function, and I loved what Rajul mentioned, think of it not as a service, but as a product. And being a product company, we understand how products are. If you were given the exact same feature when Facebook was launched 10 years back and you'd be still sitting on it, you would not like it as much, but because it continuously keeps evolving, you like it. How often do we go back to our policies and see if they still make sense? Does the leave policy still make sense? Does the bereavement policy still make sense? Does the bonus policy still make sense? So we are consistently and constantly looking at that and thinking of this as a product which the users, quote unquote employees, use every single day, experience, and that's the mandate to HR. It is not to block people, it is not to box them, but to absolutely keep hearing it.
Absolutely. So we can take one question. So I'll give it to the lady. If she will be very short, I'll ask you to add on to it. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, what I understand from design thinking, it's about innovation. Do you really think that over the time, we are actually losing on design thinking? Do you think that if design thinking were not there would not be Google or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat for that matter? So do you really think that human component with respect to technology component, we are lagging behind in that?
So design thinking is not about technology, right? I mean, it is about a change. It's a philosophy. It's a change in style of thinking.
Very quick one line for each panelist. Last final comment. Any one line from you, Shantanu?
No, I think the only point is, look, I think design thinking is all about how do you translate the innovations happening in consumer experience to solving business problems. I mean, at a very practical level, since we are all in business, if you can just start thinking about that, I think we'll be fine.
Thank you. Sonu.
It's fascinating. Keep your eyes and ears open. Read up more about it. Adopt it in your life.
Sure. Thank you. Hitu.
Design thinking is innate to everybody. It's just a codification that's been made in order to make it more available to people.
So it's everywhere, he says.
Yeah. Design thinking is knowing more about your users.
Know more about users.
Yeah.
Think more of HR like a product.
Think more HR like a product. Please do so.
Think more of HR about people.
Thank you.